Hello, welcome to the Last Supper of Outcasts, and I'm your host, Henry Kissinger. Today is Saturday, June 13th, 2026. Not that it matters. And I have a quote for today. The quote of the day is the following: "The people that are always burning books are the same people who are absolutely incapable of reading one." And that quote is by none other than Gore Vidal. And as you can probably tell by now, I'm a huge fan of Mr. Vidal. As I've said in previous videos, he to me is America's most influential intellectual and possibly one of our best brains in terms of American history that we've ever had. And that got me to thinking about how I actually first discovered him, which is another kind of a side note, is the processes leading up to finding someone or something significant or witnessing something significant can be just as interesting as the actual find itself. And I discovered Mr. Vidal by looking at perusing was the 30th anniversary of Playboy magazine. And that is the honest to God truth. It was 1984 issue, 30th anniversary of Playboy magazine. And I found an article. It was an interview printed in that Playboy magazine by Gore Vidal. I was a different child as a kid. I initially, of course, I was looking at the pictures of the girls, but then I found this article and I was totally totally captured by it. And there went the girls. I know that's odd, but I'm an odd kind of fella. When I was younger, I was listening to big band music. I was also listening to rock and roll, and like the Beatles and Kiss and stuff like that. But I would get made fun of because I had Benny Goodman records and Glenn Miller records, and my grandfather used to play the radio. It was called WEC back in New York, and they played big band music, and I was in love with it. So I was listening to that type of music. I would catch a lot of hell from my friends for listening to that music. And I was also at the age, probably, when I was 12 or 13, I was reading things like Time magazine and the History of Civilization by Will Durant. But and I was watching Phil Donahue. I remember watching Phil Donahue. So I wasn't like other kids. I'm not saying I was any better, but I was definitely different. But I still watched Saturday morning cartoons, and I used to watch the New Zoo Review, and I used to watch Puff the Magic Dragon at the same time. But I was also watching Phil Donahue and Nightline and things like that. So I've always been interested in what's going on in this world, what politically, economically, just in a search for truth. And ultimately, I'm very proud of that. So lately, I've been thinking about, I'm almost 60 years old, and I've been thinking about all of the major crises that I've actually have lived through. I was born in 1967, and I was born at close to the height of the Vietnam War, the actual height of the Vietnam War. Many, I think, historians would say it was 1968 of January, during which what was called the Tet Offensive, which was a major push to try to, I guess, defeat the North Vietnamese, which obviously didn't work. So that's a little bit about me and what I've been thinking about lately. And I was born during a crisis, the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War, and many people don't realize, and I didn't realize until much, much, much later, that the Vietnam War was a major factor in the installation of the so-called petrodollar. And many of you, I'm sure, have heard that term thrown around. And what the petrodollar is, for those of you that don't know, and I'm sure that many of you do, it was the agreement by the Vietnam War, first of all, caused massive depletion in America's gold reserve. So Nixon, and it was causing massive inflation. So Nixon took us off of the gold standard, and America was, you know, close to being bankrupt, to put it. I don't know how else to put it. So Nixon took us off of the gold standard, and there was an agreement with Saudi Arabia, who has massive gold reserves, obviously, that they exchange. They only do. They only take dollars in exchange for their oil. The only denomination they would accept from every country in the world had to exist in United States fiat currency or dollars. And that's how we sort of, I guess, survived. And we're still on that track to this day. And so that's a pretty big deal. And I was born during that whole crisis. And that's just one of many. So at the start of my life, we're already, you know, we've already been in several it's one crisis after another. But this is, I'm talking about my lifetime. And the Vietnam War actually didn't end until 1975. And I do actually remember as a kid watching the black and white TV at my grandparents' house. And I remember, you know, Walter Cronkite was the news anchor. And they would actually show footage of this war. And I remember that. And it was a big deal. And so there's that crisis. And then, you know, there was Cambodia, and there was the Iran hostage situation. We've been battling Iran since before I was born. Then there was an Iraq war, the first one with Bush Sr. That was his, according to Howard Zinn, that was America's attempt to justify its loss, or to regain its prominence as a world power, to let the world know that it wasn't a loser, even though it lost the Vietnam War badly. The first Iraq war was George Bush's attempt also to prove that he wasn't a wimp and America wasn't a loser, I guess is the best way I could say it. And so, I mean, that brings us all the way up until the 80s, you know, 1983-ish, around that time. And then I guess the real big one for me, in terms of my own, the firming of me awakening and realizing what's going on here, were the attacks on the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. That was a big one. Oh yeah, and before that, there was a big thing about there was a .com bubble burst in 1999. The stock market crashed. There's been all sorts of smaller crises, but I'm talking about big ones here. And there was talk about the millennia when we hit 2000. All the computers were going to go out of whack, and everybody is freaking out on New Year's Eve, 1999, thinking that tomorrow there's not going to be civilization. So there was it wasn't a huge thing, but it was in the public uh, collective conscious. But the next big to do was the attacks on the Twin Towers. And I spoke about this in a previous video. I actually watched the second plane hit live on TV as the news was reporting it, and spent the whole day basically at work, where everyone was just huddled around the big screen TV that the lady had at the shop there. And that leads me to talk about that led us into going into Iraq again, uh, for no reason. They didn't have anything to do with it. I remember Saddam Hussein getting captured in his little hole and getting hung, and they were saying that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which later on we found out to be a total lie. And there's actually video footage of Bush Sr. making a joke about it at some kind of a White House event, I think it was, where he's looking under the chairs and joking about finding weapons of mass destruction. So I mean, they're laughing at us. That was George Bush and his cronies and all the political class. They're laughing at us, and they're still laughing at us. Uh, and basically, all that really boiled down to, it was a massive wealth transfer from the bottom to the top. And we always wonder why the rich get richer. Well, it's because of events like this. Every crisis that we experienced is nothing more than a wealth transfer. A reason to go to war, a reason to pump money into the military industrial complex, and to basically have a wealth transfer from the middle class to the upper class. And it's getting more and more blatant as we move forward in time. And also, 9/11 was the firm establishment of the beginnings of the surveillance state going into full force. It existed before then, with the National Security Act instituted by Harry Truman. You can look all of this stuff up. I'm not making it up. I am a student of history, a pretty decent one, and I'm going off the top of my head, so I may not be articulating in the best form, but I'm trying to bring these things to your attention. Because people that say that things are not going well, they're not going well for a certain class of us, and they're not supposed to go well for a certain class of us, meaning the poor and the middle class. The poor and the middle class, I firmly believe, and especially as I go along in time here, it's becoming more and more obvious to me that we are being deliberately decimated. We are getting crushed, and it's on purpose. So things are going very well. They're going exactly as they should for the 1/1000th of a percent of people that are at the very top of our economic system. So there's that crisis. And then I also lived through the worst recession. I would say it was the Depression, and economists would probably agree with me. There was the Great Recession, 2008. I was actually a loan officer during that time. I was a residential real estate loan officer working in the subprime market. And we did not do anything such as the liar's loans or the stated loans where a janitor could say he's making 100,000 a year. I didn't. I'm proud to say I didn't do any of that. Everything was documented. I had W-2s. I had pension statements, 401k statements. Everything was documented, and the loans we were selling at those stage, and I didn't know any better. I was only like 32 years old, and that's not an excuse, but this is another reason for my suspicions and how I'm pretty sure that I'm not wrong. I'm on to something, as well as are a lot of other people. We used to sell these loans called 228 loans. And a 228 loan was targeted towards people that had bad credit or inadequate credit. And the idea was that to get a 2-year loan, still a 30-year loan, but the 2 years, it was fixed at a certain interest rate, which was, at the time, the person that had a 620 credit score would take an 8% interest rate because they couldn't get a loan anywhere else but as a paper. And they take it, and the idea with the 228 was that you heal your credit over 2 years and you refinance the loan. With the idea that real estate values would go up. And that was the sales pitch. And we all know what happened there. The banks were, during 2008, Lehman Brothers crashed. I remember watching Washington Mutual, which was a huge bank, go under. They were falling down like dominoes. It was a really scary time. Real estate values plummeted. So these people, what we were selling was not true, and it's the same thing that's going on today. Just everything has a different name. Let's put it that way. But again, I feel like I when I was in that business, that's when all of my suspicions, all my spidey sense was really starting to tingle at that stage because of the people that you had to compete with. And I remember I changed shops one time, and me at the beginning of my career within the real estate world, it was just me and another guy, and he showed me what was going on and how the mechanics worked of it and how to sell. And it seemed pretty honest. But then we had a falling out, and I went to another office, and I remember the guys in there, they weren't even discreet about it, saying, "Oh, we'll just create a W-2. We'll just Photoshop the income in." And that's when I had enough of that. And people always wonder why did you get out of that? Well, there was a lot of money to be made, but I couldn't be a part of that world. And then you had a lot of people that were felons going into the business, people that didn't belong there. And then that got me into a whole nother mindset of how Wall Street works. And, it turns out, most of them are just a bunch of lying criminals. Let's face it. So I didn't want nothing to do with it. And lastly, there were other, like an AIDS epidemic during my 60 years here. That was another big one. There's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories about that. But the last one that had a big effect on me and is still having effect on me was the global health scare in 2020. And I'm not going to say it because I'm trying to get started with something here. And I don't want YouTube to take me down right away when I'm just trying to get started. But I think you all know what I'm talking about. Lockdowns, things were getting censored all over the place. You couldn't go anywhere without performing certain functions. and this and that. And to me, and to other people that I've spoken with and that are very intelligent, it was another wealth transfer. And that whole scare was a preparation for something else that's coming. They're testing us. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm just ranting a little bit, but I'm trying to put things out there that maybe some of you don't realize. But I'm almost 60 years old. A lot of young kids don't get, they don't, they're not old enough to even put the puzzle together. At this stage, in earnest, I've been trying to put the puzzle together. And the puzzle is, I believe, in my own mind, I'm not completely wrong. I would be willing to bet 95% that I'm not wrong. We are actually witnessing a planned destruction of the poor and the middle class, and the United States is under severe attack by, it's an inside job, in other words. So there you have it. I hope you got something out of the video. Please like, subscribe to the video. If there's a notification bell, please hit the notification bell. And other than that, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon.